Many years ago, I had a dream about opening a club which would only open its doors between the months of October and April. A warm, welcoming place with roaring log fires and cozy nooks where you could sit with your friends and chat about things that interest you. Well, I couldn't even begin to afford to open a club, so the dream died. But its passing is commemorated by this podcast, presenting, for the winter months, a series of cozy chats with friends old and new on topics of interest. Welcome to the October Club. Something a bit different on this episode of the October Club. Every year, my wife and I travel to Sci-Fi Scarborough and enjoy 2 and a bit days of geeking out by the seaside at this wonderful fantasy and sci-fi convention. Each time, I write a review for my blog, but because we have such a great time, it gets increasingly difficult to say something new about the experience. And then it came to me. This year, as well as publishing a written review of the convention for my blog, I'd create an extended audio version for the October Club, enhanced with some sounds that I recorded during the visit. So roll up your trouser legs, grab your bucket and spade, and join me as we pay a visit to Sci-Fi Scarborough 2025. Although I've lived my entire life in Tyne and Wear, my family has a strong connection with the North Yorkshire coast. My grandfather's family were fisherfolk and volunteer lifeboatmen in Filey for many generations, and I remember lots of holidays in that area. My grandparents themselves even lived for a short time in a flat above a gift shop in Filey town centre, before my grandmother's famously nomadic nature brought them back to the very same street in Sunderland that they had left a couple of years earlier. I have dim recollections of watching Doctor Who's The Seeds of Doom in that Filey flat during the half-term school holidays, and later that year we'd return during the blistering summer of 1976 to find the fire escape that provided entrance to the building coated with a plague of ladybirds. We didn't stick exclusively to Filey, however. We went to all the lovely coastal towns of that area: Whitby, Bridlington, and, of course, Scarborough. I have strong memories of visiting Scarborough as a child in the 1970s. From the Woolworths in town, which seemed to have a permanent residency by TV star Don Estelle plugging his latest album, down the Victorian funicular railway to the Golden Sands and the classic British seaside layout of amusement arcades, seaside gift emporiums, and fish and chip shops. If you're perhaps not from the UK and don't know what any of these words mean, just Google British seaside traditions, and I'm sure you'll be able to find plenty of information. Scarborough is little changed in the intervening 50 years. It still has deck chairs and donkey rides and many of the things that city folks often think long forgotten. Scarborough is one of the favourite places for my wife and I to visit for the day, being a little under 2 hours' drive over rolling moorland from our home. The first time we visited and parked in town, I didn't think that the aged carriages of the funicular railway, these days called the cliff lift, would accommodate my wife's wheelchair, and we opted instead for the zigzag path leading down to the seafront. This was okay going down, but ridiculously challenging going back up. Before our next visit, I found the wheelchair would fit in the funicular carriages, and that has been our preferred method ever since, except for the one year when the aged machinery was undergoing an overhaul, when I was lucky to survive the whole weekend without suffering an aneurysm. My wife is only a casual fan of fantasy and science fiction, unlike myself. She watches Doctor Who, Star Trek, Star Wars, Marvel, Harry Potter, etc., but her main interests lie in crafting and musicals. So it was something of a surprise when my wife turned to me one day in 2016 and said, "Hey, there's a sci-fi convention in Scarborough. Should we go?" I was more than happy to reply in the affirmative, but I wasn't sure what to expect. I used to go to a lot of conventions, mainly Doctor Who, in the 1990s, and I have many unpleasant memories of the kind of pushy stewards that you used to get at big events in those days. Little tin Hitlers corralling people into queues and throwing their weight about. I was twice threatened with expulsion from Doctor Who conventions in the 90s for minor offences, and I wasn't sure I wanted to expose my wife to that. But there was a very different feeling about Sci-Fi Scarborough. It didn't give the impression of the kind of cold bureaucracy that I had previously encountered. It was colourful, inviting, and that big thing that those old conventions were sorely lacking in back in the 90s, fun. The first convention that my wife and I attended was the fourth that had been held in the Scarborough Spa Centre, the sprawling Victorian entertainment and theatre complex on the south bay of the seaside town, and we loved every minute of it. For me, it was the perfect remedy to those oppressive conventions of yesteryear. Attendance quickly became an annual tradition that we gleefully adhere to every year. In the years 2020 and 2021, a little something known as the global pandemic put paid to the possibility of a live event. I remember discussing with my wife whether it would be advisable to attend if the convention went ahead the first year. The idea of not having our annual fix of Sci-Fi Scarborough felt terrible, but eventually the decision was taken out of our hands. Nevertheless, for those 2 years, the organisers of Sci-Fi Scarborough went out of their way to create a stunning online event, featuring zoomed videos from the homes of the stars, online cosplay contests, online art contests, fan videos, and musical interludes. And all of this was free. Pre-purchased 2020 tickets were honoured when the live event returned. An online event might not be everybody's idea of a convention, but needs must when the devil drives. Sci-Fi Scarborough didn't have to put anything on at all, and a great many big corporate conventions will just have cancelled in those years, and that was the end of it. But because they care about their attendees and didn't want to disappoint people unduly, they went out of their way to organise the best day's entertainment possible under the circumstances. It was a very reassuring presence during what was a very trying time, and I have fond memories of sitting in front of my computer for those virtual conventions. Sci-Fi Scarborough returned in 2022, and although money might have been initially a little bit tight, they've gone from strength to strength. Sci-Fi Scarborough 2025 is the 8th convention that my wife and I have attended, and the 11th that has been held. I had very positive feelings about it when the guest list was revealed week by week on Friday evenings. Once again, there was a strong Doctor Who presence, with announced appearances by Carol Ann Ford, Susan in the First Doctor's era, Katie Manning, Jo Grant in the Third Doctor's era, and John Levine, Sergeant Benton across several Doctors. They were to be joined by Bond girl and the epitome of 70s glamour Caroline Munro, and a trio of Star Wars actors, Angus MacInnes, Star Wars, Brian Wheeler, Return of the Jedi, and returning guest Clem So, The Force Awakens, and so many other genre credits, it's impossible to list them here. Sadly, Angus MacInnes passed away suddenly shortly after his announcement, but Andor actor Jonathan Cass was able to step in as a replacement. Also, John Levine had to drop out for medical reasons and was replaced by the Young Ones alum Christopher Ryan. It's a bit of a shake-up, and I'm sure the organisers were gritting their teeth for a short while. But the final lineup was wonderfully eclectic and rather exciting. Add to this a number of high-profile artists, creators and cosplayers, and you've got a bit of something for everyone. That's the thing about Sci-Fi Scarborough. It's not your one-note convention that focuses on a particular TV series or movie franchise. There's a bit of something for everyone. And, as I'll discuss later, it intentionally caters to a number of tastes. We regularly travel down to Scarborough from South Tyneside on Friday, check into our hotel and get settled, ready for an early start on Saturday morning. This time we decided to split our 2-hour drive by stopping off and having some lunch in the lovely market town of Thirsk. The weather didn't look amazingly promising, overcast and with a bit of a cold nip in the air. Still, this is Britain, and we've attended Sci-Fi Scarborough in all kinds of weather, so we weren't too bothered about that. Stopping off in Thirsk meant that we approached Scarborough from a different angle than usual. We usually titter at the strange names of places that we pass, but this time we didn't go past Barnby and Boggle Hole, but instead mused on whether Bagby is on the outskirts of Hobbiton, whether Wombleton is the second home of the denizens of Wimbledon Common, and whether Ampleforth is a popular camping destination in the Carry On films. This unfamiliar route also awarded us the dubious privilege of having to scale Sutton Bank, with its perilous 25% incline. Somewhat of a challenge for the automatic gears on our little car, and not something we'll be rushing to repeat anytime soon. Still, we arrived in Scarborough in late afternoon and got checked into our hotel room. Last year, due to a recent expansion of the Premier Inn, we had to navigate a rabbit warren of corridors to reach our accessible room overlooking the car park. This year, the accessible room was much closer to the reception desk, but with an unimpressive view of the scruffy rooftops of the building next door. Oh well, you can't have everything. We got settled in for a good night's sleep before day one of Sci-Fi Scarborough. The weather on Saturday morning was reasonably sunny, but with a chill wind blowing in from the sea. Nevertheless, we put on our coats and took the funicular down to the seafront. For the last couple of years, the opening time of Sci-Fi Scarborough has been put back from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. to give traders more time to set up their stalls. But that's okay, because there's always plenty of atmosphere to enjoy outside while waiting for the doors to open. The moment that I truly feel that I'm back at Sci-Fi Scarborough is when I start to hear the voices of the Daleks patrolling the doors to the spa. There are stormtroopers, Wookiees, and all kind of other costumed characters there as well, but it's the grating tones of the Daleks on our approach that reach you first. It was quite obvious to us on our approach to the spa centre that the queues were substantially longer than they had been in previous years. We were there quite early, but as we started to move towards the doors, I became aware that the queue was snaking back behind us for a long, long way. Even the first interview panel at 12 p.m. was delayed because there was still a long queue of patrons waiting to get in. I mean, this is obviously great news for the convention, and I think it took them by surprise as much as anyone else. Every increase in attendance to an independent event like Sci-Fi Scarborough helps to assure the existence of another convention the following year, so although some people might have had to queue longer, it's absolutely a good thing. As a Doctor Who fan, it was also reassuring to see such a healthy turnout of the faithful at this year's Sci-Fi Scarborough. Cosplay is a big deal at this convention, and I don't think I've ever seen quite so many Doctor Who-based outfits in one place before. There was a definite upsurge of Who-ishness at the 2025 convention, and at a time when social media seems to be awash with alarmist stories about the series crashing ratings and possible cancellation, it's very comforting to see that it still has such a strong following. In fact, the cosplay in general gives a much more positive view of fandoms than you read online. The internet continues to spew hatred about various Disney Star Wars ventures, but at an event like this, I'm seeing no shortage of costumes based on the sequels and the Disney Plus series. Cosplay is a thing that seems to have burgeoned in the 21st century. Back in the day, you only saw the odd person wearing a costume at conventions, and it wasn't called cosplay, it was just called dressing up. I'm aware that cosplay was a bigger deal in countries like Japan and the United States, but it's only since the turn of the century that the reserved Brits have started pulling on their tights and wigs and truly embracing the cosplay ethic. And it really is huge these days. For some people, cosplay is the very heart of a convention like Sci-Fi Scarborough. And you can see not only people cosplaying characters from major franchises like Star Wars and Doctor Who, but also niche characters from comics and anime that your average bloke in the street might not recognize, but which have a deep cult following. The Ocean Room of the Spa has an entire area of the convention dedicated to the art of cosplay, with an annual cosplay competition and talks about how to get started in costume construction, hosted by professional cosplayer Luna Moon. As well as the attendees who adopt cosplay, there are also a substantial number of professional cosplayers and prop builders. Many of these attend year on year, such as the Guardians of Kashyyyk, Droid Builders UK, NYPD and Outer Rim Props, Scarborough Garrison, Central Legion Rogues Gallery, Echo Base UK Alliance, Britsit Judges, Cyber King Productions, and a whole host of Daleks, led by Davros in his extraordinary stained glass chair and new roll cage model, and Dalek 2-0. If there's anyone I've missed out, please forgive me. It's all a bit dizzying, and I think I need to lie down. No time for lying down, though, as the slightly delayed first interview panel is on at the Spa Theatre, with classic Doctor Who companions Carol Ann Ford and Katie Manning taking the stage, which has once again been decked with sun loungers, windbreaks, and all manner of seaside paraphernalia. Katie Manning seems to have gone down extraordinarily well, with autograph queues stretching right round the Grand Hall. I don't know if it's just because she was very open and chatty with every single person for longer than would probably be advisable, or because she's just beloved and everyone wants her autograph. Probably a combination of the two. Either way, the interview panel was a lot of fun, even if 45 minutes didn't seem long enough to encompass the careers of these two wonderful actresses.
I was told that she was extraordinarily intelligent. Well, I mean, that was can't that she was going to be incredibly athletic, great, hooray, yay. None of that. She was going to be telepathic. I understand why they dropped that because, let's face it, the whole thing about the show is that I get into trouble, they come and look for me, they find me, or with difficulty. I mean, none of that would happen if I was telepathic. I'd just ring up, Grandpa, Cody, or whoever there, Ian from something. And that's it, end of story. Very short episode. I couldn't understand why they cast me, because they wouldn't let me be interesting at all. And I wanted to be interesting and alien, and that was all cut. In fact, we had to refilm it because I was too weird. Strangely enough, I was on a cruise with Bertie Lambert, and we were sitting by the pool as you do, chatting there. And I said, "Hey, Verity, I never did know, why did you cast me?" And she said, "Well, this was strange." I said, "You mean interesting, original, unique?" She said, "No, strange." I looked at her and she got a point. So anyway, that's basically what I was talking about.
You said that to you, Katie, because you obviously were joining somebody that was already established and already had had a few years under it. What was the experience like for you going into that role, knowing more of what was coming again?
No, I didn't know more. No, because truly, being older than a lot of the, like Sophie and everyone, who they could grow up and they said they grew up watching Doctor Who. I was 16 when Doctor Who went up, and you're the only ones I saw. But, I was 16. You think I was going to sit at home on a Saturday night watching anything? And my father was on the radio at the same time, so, And so I didn't know a great deal about it, to be honest with you, and it was just on that, Barry decided he wanted to, get a younger audience in, and we started to make a lot of changes, and they've got an extra 2 and 6pence to work with special effects, because it was really beginning to break then. And so it was really exciting, what we used to call CSO, colour separation overlay, which I think you call blue or green screen. They practiced that on me. But the only problem with that for me was, because I can't see, what happens is, you're sitting there and you're supposed to watch this little screen, right? And so that you can work with what it is that's there. I couldn't see the screen. So I had to kind of learn how to work with everything, which is great. If you can't see, all the monsters become very, very real to you because they're in your head. But no, I had no idea what I was getting into. And I was in another television series where the leading man was like the latest hot. And I went, nobody was interested in me. They were just saying, oh, Kenneth Haig, isn't he gorgeous? You know. Anyway, so, but also they shortlisted it to like 3 people because I couldn't get to the interview. And they said, well, we're not going to go ahead. We just need to see this one more person. I got terribly lost at the BBC Centre because I kept taking my glasses off. Because I look like Thora Hurd. You're all probably too young, you know. These great big thick glasses, and I had this dreadful cough and one thing and another. And so I ended up, and they said, could you read from the script? Because Richard Franklin used to tell the story, because he did the reading with all of the other girls. And there was about 500, and they got it down to 3. And then I come in late, coughing, and they said, can you read from the script? So I didn't want them to see these great big thick glasses, because I knew they weren't, you know. So I went, they took one look at me trying to read with my nose, and so they said, would you go and do an improvisation? So I got to just do an improv. And the next thing I know, I get a phone call the very next day. I went back because I was doing this other, and I was able to say, would you like to play Joe Grant? I was absolutely shocked. Man, I'm shocked whenever I get a job. My agent said I'm the only actor that she's ever had that said, are you sure?
The interview panels at Sci-Fi Scarborough are always wonderfully relaxed and casual, with the 2 interviewers really putting the guests at their ease. Possibly related to what I was just saying about Katie Manning, the Companions panel was incredibly well attended, possibly the biggest turnout I've seen at a panel in my time visiting this convention, which is great because it bodes well for the continued existence of these interview panels. The panels are quite close together, however, only 15 minutes between them, so you have to pick and choose between them if you want to take in all the other goodies available. Not a complaint, of course. There's so much going on that you can't possibly attend everything. Unfortunately, we had to skip the Christopher Ryan panel at 1 p.m. because I really wanted to see the Caroline Munro panel at 2 p.m. and we were already getting a bit peckish, necessitating a break for lunch. There are plenty of alternatives available for refreshments, from the spa's own cafe to Farah's bar next door and stalls selling crepes and German sausages in the Sun Court. The Sun Court is a large open area with tables and chairs where you can relax and chill out for a while. There's always something going on there, whether it's Daleks or a DJ, and there are also a couple of bouncy castles for anyone with small kids that need to burn off some energy. It's kind of the beating heart of the convention, where people can meet and chat and make arrangements for the rest of the day. The weather wasn't the best on Saturday, with a chill wind blowing in from the sea and waves crashing against the seawall, but it was dry, and that's always a bonus. We have been there years when it was peeing down, which is disappointing because the Sun Court has no roof of any kind, so wet weather can make it a no-no. It's also a great place for people watching. I don't mean that in a creepy way, of course. I mean that you can sit back and decompress whilst observing some of the incredible cosplays as they pass through. It's always fun seeing someone trying to eat a German sausage whilst dressed as a weeping angel. Or something. Suitably fed and watered, we headed back to the Spa Theatre to see the interview panel with Caroline Munro, who was absolutely delightful. For reasons of space, she was billed on the poster and programme as Hammer Horror and James Bond star Caroline Munro, but as a child of the 1970s, I remember her from so many other things. Sure, she was in Hammer's Captain Kronos Vampire Hunter, 1974, and the James Bond film The Spy Who Loved Me, 1977, but I was happy to hear her talk about her work with Ray Harryhausen on The Golden Voyage of Sinbad, 1973, and opposite Peter Cushing and Doug McClure in one of my all-time guilty pleasures, At the Earth's Core, 1976. As a child of the 1980s, my wife was surprised and delighted when she was asked about appearing in the video for Adam and the Ants' Goody Two Shoes.
I think Kronos was brilliantly written because that was Ryan Clement and it was funny and witty and very sweet and tender. She had a nice tender scenes with Horst Jackson. So that was very pleasing. I'm just trying to think, what would I have done? Could I have done differently? I
so awful. I look back on it and I think that's so bad. And you know when it's not working, because you can feel when it's not working. Somehow it's just not coming. You just can't get it. And I did something, but that's different again. That was Margam Castle. It's only a tiny bit I did in that. And I couldn't find the character. I couldn't find her. And I was up all night before I had to shoot. And I suddenly found her and I thought, I've got her now. But it took me a long time to really absorb it. I can't think which scenes I would redo or would rewrite. I'm not really a writer. I mean, I enjoy writing, scribbling, writing, but I can't.
Do any of the sort of 1970s sort of sensibilities, you kind of touched on this a little bit, would you go back and want to change any of that, I don't know how you describe it, atmosphere, that kind of expectation, compared to maybe the present day, or
it's a lot different.
Yeah.
I mean, I think filming today is a lot different. Also, there's a lot of CGI around, which is Ray was, and that was, Ray, that was a no-no. Because the thing is about the films we did in the 70s, especially if you did horror or films in general and television, it was all practically done in front of you. So therefore, it helped the actor tremendously because you're seeing the actual things before your eyes. Whereas after it's all CGI and put on, which is wonderful. I mean, nothing against it, but I think personally it's a slight overuse of it. I don't know how you feel. I mean, obviously, again, the young people, it's what people are going up to now, CGI. So when they see old school films like a Ray Harryhausen, I mean, I suppose it must look quite strange, but it's endearing. It's a certain realness about it, even though it's not real. It's almost more real than am I making sense? I don't know if I have myself.
I think there've been a lot of fans of practical effects.
Yeah.
Around.
Yeah, because I mean, practical. When we did the Earth's core, that was extraordinary because everything was done practically. The fire was real. Jumping over the fire. What do they call them? The sheets of fire or something of fire. All real fire. And we had to. And Peter Cushing at that time was not, in the first flush of youth. And we all had to jump through these fields and when he was fighting off the fiery beasties, I don't know if anybody's seen that film, but it's very sweet. It's a lovely children's film, that one. And it's very, he was wonderful in that. He was funny in that. It was very funny. And he actually had to shoot his bows and arrows at the fiery beastie. But the fire, not Gordon Hessler, Kevin Connor, our director about the Earth core, said, we'll get in stand-ins for this. And Doug McClure and myself looked at each other and he said, no, we'll do it. Not knowing what was going to happen. We'll do it. We don't need stand-ins. Possibly we did, but what you got was real reactions because the fiery beastie shot up the fire, overshot a little bit, and my hair was standing on end. And Doug, and the screams were real because it was so hot. So that's practical effects for you.
After the panel, we went and took a look around all of the dealers in the Grand Hall. There was another panel with author Peter F. Hamilton, but since neither of us is familiar with his work, we gave that a miss. I hope he got a good turnout, though. The Grand Hall is where most of the merchant stalls are situated, although there are some in the Sun Court Suite. It's a huge space, but has in previous years been sometimes a little cramped and difficult to negotiate with a wheelchair. I recall the previous year when guest Danny John Jules almost wrecked several stalls trying to navigate a Dalek that he had requisitioned through too narrow a space. However, this year they seem to have a reduced number of rows, making for a roomier corridors of stalls. Along the base of the main stage are the desks where the celebrities sell autographs and are usually more than happy to chat with you. Unlike a lot of big corporate conventions, the photos and autographs are quite reasonably priced, so you don't have to stand in an enormous queue to get one. Probably. I'm looking at you, Manning. The main stage also has a display of Doctor Who props and costumes courtesy of Cyber King Productions, where you can have your photo taken next to the TARDIS console or one of several monsters. If photo opportunities are your thing, there are plenty to choose from at Sci-Fi Scarborough, and you won't have to pay an arm and a leg. There is literally something for everyone among these stalls, with traders selling collectibles, artwork, crafts, jewellery, books, both commercial and self-published, artisan alcoholic drinks, and pretty much anything you can think of. If the reduction in the number of corridors this year is down to less traders being interested in attending, it certainly didn't put a dent in the variety or quality of the goods available, and, as I mentioned earlier, from a purely selfish point of view, it certainly did make the place easier to navigate. You have to be very considerate when navigating narrow spaces if there are people in elaborate cosplay, such as armor, because you must remember that they may not be able to hear you and might only have a restricted field of vision. My wife and I left for the Saturday at around 5 p.m. There are things going on after that. The Geek Pub Quiz takes place at the adjacent Farrer's Bar at 5:30 to 9:30, and there's a lively social scene after that. But our particular circumstances mean that my wife and I are dependent on the cliff lift, which only runs until 5:45 p.m. So we generally give it a miss and go for a nice meal at the restaurant at our hotel before settling down for the night. It's always nice to see people that you recognize from the convention wandering along the front or through the town, sometimes still in costume. We shared a carriage in the cliff lift with 3 people dressed as characters from the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. It seemed oddly appropriate given the Victorian nature of the funicular. Sunday is generally more relaxed, and quite rightly so. Those who attend for only one day of the weekend generally attend on a Saturday, so Sunday is a bit quieter, and it gives one the chance to take a more contemplative look at that expensive luxury item that you were mulling over whether you could afford to buy yesterday. It also gives you a better chance to get closer to the guests, who were at this stage nicely relaxed. A bonus this year is that, in contrast to the Saturday, Sunday was unexpectedly hot and sunny, reaching 18 degrees in the afternoon. That may not sound like much to anyone reading from abroad, but it's damn hot for the north of England in April. The weather must have taken everyone by surprise, because when we approached the spa at 11 a.m, the beach was almost empty. After mooching around the dealers' tables for a while, we made our way up to the Spa Theatre to watch the Star Wars panel, with Brian Wheeler, Clem So, and Jonathan Cass. Possibly because it was Sunday, this didn't have as big an audience as the panels yesterday, but it still had a respectable turnout. It's always interesting to hear stories about the making of Star Wars from these actors who play relatively small roles in the franchise, because it feels like over the years we've heard everything that the big stars have to say on TV and in magazines. The opinions of the less prominent stars give us an interesting new perspective on a series of movies and TV shows that have been very deeply analysed over the years. Some might say overanalyzed.
What's been your most interesting costume, or the one that's been you liked, or has been the most difficult?
I don't know. I was just when I worked on Doctor Who on Oxygen, because I played one of the space corporals or zombies. That spacesuit as well, I really love, and actually I had the opportunity to actually buy it recently. It was up on the Doctor Who auction for children in need. And my friend actually ended up buying 3 of the costumes, but one of my set picks, I compared the costume, and it was actually my costume. I thought, and I asked him, he said, yeah, he was happy to sell it to me, and he didn't make any profit or anything on it. He was just happy to sell it to me. So I own the space zombie costume from Oxygen. That was one of my favourites, and maybe the Doctor Strange one, the first one, the second one, the camouflage. That was really cool costume, and there's so much detail in there. I would love to own that if anybody knows where that is.
Do you have a favourite bad boy, wrong person, naughty man costume? Your uniform selection?
Well, it's the toss-up between the ISB lieutenant's uniform, and but I suppose I more often than that I played a German officer or a Nazi. I mean, I'm a Nazi megastructures, Hitler Circle of Evil. a film called The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare with Henry Cavill. Has anybody seen that? Brilliant, yeah, do you like it? Well, I went to Turkey for 3 weeks filming that. I got blown up, shot, and stabbed in the neck by Henry Cavill. So technically I've been killed by Superman. So, but I love, because the uniforms, Hugo Boss originally designed the Nazi uniforms, and they were made in his factory in Poland, I think. So when you put them on, because the retro ones are made to his design, when you put them on, you can't help but stand up straight because they're so well tailored. But when you do put them on, you've got to show them a lot of respect. You can't go around doing salutes and marching, because there's still a handful of people today that if they saw a Nazi uniform, they'd probably drop dead on the spot. Yeah. Because of obviously what's gone on.
I was just to lead on to that and say, because there are parallels really between the ISB and the Nazis. Do you do any sort of like historical research about what's going to work here for this sort of feel, or is it just, does it almost, as you said, you put the uniform on and all of a sudden,
you get when you put your uniform on, you get the medals, and also the Victoria Cross ribbon, first class and second class, and there's various medals, an artillery, there's a wounded badge, there's all sorts of medals they give you, and I do like to research where these medals have come from, just to get an idea of who this soldier was, and so then you sort of take on, I'm sure you're the same, you kind of take on a little bit of the personality of the person that you think you're going to be, and then it just helps with your performance. So if you know a little bit about the backstory about the medals and how he got the medals, then it does help, yeah.
It was also interesting that with Brian, Clem and Jonathan, you have actors that represent Star Wars across all the decades and in its many different forms. Brian was in Return of the Jedi in the original trilogy. Clem was in The Force Awakens and Solo in the post-George Lucas film era, and Jonathan features in the new Disney Plus series Andor. It's fascinating to hear different perspectives of the same franchise, to hear how things have changed and yet, bizarrely, remained the same. They gave some interesting opinions on how the rise of digital technology might affect the roles of actors in the future, but displayed faith in the actors' union to ensure that no one is taken advantage of. They also discussed how it feels to have your scenes end up on the cutting room floor. There are a lot of similarities between the way that various franchises are regarded by fans online, whether it is Doctor Who, Star Trek, or Star Wars. They all have, to varying degrees, an established fan base that contains a vocal minority who decry everything new, usually before it's even been screened. They usually moan that the current product is all about making money, but it was always about making money. It was the overseas popularity and merchandise sales of Doctor Who that kept it alive post-1989 and made its revival in 2005 viable. It was the savvy rights chicanery of George Lucas in the 70s that made Star Wars the big money spinner that Disney were prepared to pay $4 billion for, having passed on it in 1975. I think that the type of fans who attend Sci-Fi Scarborough appreciate that there's a place for every iteration of their favourite franchises. Sunday lunchtime means fish and chips time. That's part of the routine that my wife and I have grown to love over the years. We left the spa and wandered along the front to our favourite fish and chip restaurant, eating them on a bench facing the sea. The weather was really sunny by now, and local people must have realised that because the beach was beginning to fill up with sun worshippers. Whilst walking along the front the past few years, I've been fascinated by the mystic Zoltan booths in a couple of the arcades. You know him, right? He's that turbaned automaton who offers to tell you the future in a vaguely racist accent. Well, this year, I decided to avail myself of his services. I put in my £1, and he quoted a mystic rhyme at me, but no card came out telling the future. Bah, I should have known better from his wonky turban. It seems that the Sex Pistols were right. There is no future. Full of fish and chips, we returned to the spa. One of the many great things about the location of Sci-Fi Scarborough is that you're not stuck in some conference centre in the middle of an industrial estate or at a hotel somewhere off a motorway. You can wander in and out to your heart's content, and you're straight onto a beautiful stretch of coastline with golden sands, amusement arcades, a big wheel, a fun fair, and all kinds of traditional British seaside attractions. If you've got an hour to spare before or after the event, just have a wander along the front, take in the sights. Or if the weather is nice, as it was on Sunday, and you're feeling particularly brave, or have a wetsuit, you can even have a dip in the North Sea. But don't say I didn't warn you. Having missed the one on Saturday, we made our way to the Sun Court for an audience with the Daleks, this year featuring probably more Daleks than ever before, being interrogated as always by Scott Goodman, looking, if such a thing is possible, even more like the Third Doctor than he did last year. This is always lots of fun, with the only problem being the varying volumes of the Dalek voices, which make it tricky to hear what some of them are saying. Luckily, Scott has a microphone and will repeat for the audience anything that he thinks sounds a bit muffled. Scott Goodman is a friend of mine, and my wife keeps saying that I should go up and talk to him. But I only ever met him once, 25 years ago, so I don't think he'll remember me. Curse my social anxiety. The Daleks, all handmade by enthusiasts, really are extraordinary, and they're a significant part of Sci-Fi Scarborough because along with the Stormtroopers and the Wookiees, they make for great publicity. The convention gets a lot of coverage in newspapers and on television, and you can guarantee that they'll gravitate straight towards the Daleks and the Star Wars costumes. These are cultural touchstones that Joe Public will recognise and immediately know the significance of. As well as appearing at Sci-Fi Scarborough, the various groups that appear year on year do lots of really great charity work, and it's also effective publicity for the convention. This might go some way to explaining the epic turnout this year. Well, time marches on, and we had a long drive ahead of us. So although the convention wraps up at around 5 p.m, we left at around 3. Much as it's a glorious thing to approach the Spa Centre on Saturday morning and hear the sounds of Sci-Fi Scarborough approaching, it's a saddening thing to hear them fading into the distance behind you as you leave. Sci-Fi Scarborough is such a welcoming convention, and although it might not have the massive guest lists some of the big corporate conventions have, it is much more friendly and inclusive. People come to this convention for all kinds of reasons, and Leeds Bradford Starfleet and the rest of the Sci-Fi Scarborough crew go out of their way to cater to all tastes, whether it's cosplay, gaming, prop building, or just good old film and TV sci-fi. As we made our way back to the cliff lift, it was evident that everyone had realised what a corking hot day it had become, and the beach was packed with families. When the weather is fine, Scarborough is as good a place for a family holiday as anywhere I can think of. We took the usual route home, so no nerve-jangling plummet down Sutton Bank. The next day, as I washed dead flies and copious amounts of seagull crap off our little car, I felt really sad to no longer be at Sci-Fi Scarborough. Birds chirped overhead, and there was the distant sound of lawn mowing. But there were no Daleks barking orders, no mumbling Mandalorians, and no wailing Wookiees, and life felt significantly less magical for the lack of them. Sci-Fi Scarborough 2025 easily lived up to the promise of its predecessors. It's a fun, adventurous, and relaxed convention for all the family, and it's quite clear that those who run it are as much fans of the things on display as those who attend year after year. If you've never been to a convention before, or, like me several years ago, you haven't been to one for decades, don't plunge into some coldly corporate Ubercon that you need to mortgage your house to attend. Pop along to Sci-Fi Scarborough, and I guarantee you won't regret it. The only thing that saddens me about the whole experience is that we now have to wait another year before the next one. I wonder if there's any chance we might get more of this lovely weather.
Let me be beside the seaside. I'll be beside the girls who play. And there's lots of girls beside. I should like to be beside the seaside, beside the sea.
That was Sci-Fi Scarborough 2025, and that was the last episode of Season 2 of the October Club. If you're a new listener who has just tuned in to listen to the convention review, you might like to know that we have previous episodes where guests discuss The Prisoner, The Avengers, The Twilight Zone, Lord of the Rings, Star Trek lore, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and all manner of other pop culture subjects. Visit octoberclubpodcast.wordpress.com for more information. Goodbye. You have been listening to the October Club podcast review of Sci-Fi Scarborough 2025, written and presented by Paul Ferry. The theme music was by Peter Falconer, and the show was produced and edited by Paul Ferry. This was a Mosaic production.
When you find yourself in times of trouble, brother, Zoltar comes to you, speaking words of wisdom. Let it be. Are you ready? For Zoltar, the wise gypsy, has prepared a little poem for you. Life is mostly fluff and bubble. Two things stand alone. Kindness is another struggle. Courage is your own. Do not worry. Have courage today for your next adventure. Come back and visit Zoltar for more wisdom